In a land, in a time, before time began. In the land before time, but before animated singing dinosaurs even, there was a race of hyper-intelligent beings known as the P Continuum, with the power to fundamentally reshape reality with their slightest whims. No one could challenge these unstoppable titans. But one day, they left their keys lying around, and their powers got hijacked by some slightly more awesome beings who squished them to oblivion like little teeny bugs a few moments before our universe began. These were known as the Q. And the next thing they did was look at the newly created universe and decided it was in a real mess. So to fix the mess, or at least explain it, they caused the emergence of Trekosophy, the Star Trek philosophy podcast, where today we will be discussing the Q Continuum. But first, let me introduce our Continuum, tonight's Trekosophers. First, our official button-pushing biped who edits these episodes together, Chris McGee.
I just love pushing buttons.
And next, our resident micro brain with a macro head, Brandon Kirby. Growl for us to let us know you still care.
Sure, baby.
And I'm the guy in the red shirt, updated between series designs with a finger snap, Ben McLean. And like I said, tonight we're discussing, or continuing our discussion on the Q, which are one of the most interesting and fun races in Star Trek. And we're going to be focusing tonight on the Q's appearances in Voyager mainly, because I think we dealt with the earlier appearances in part 1 of this episode. So that gets started with, what was the first appearance of Q on Voyager?
It was Quinn.
Right, and why did... Quinn is a Q that wants to commit suicide. But why?
Because he had lived too long. He had accomplished all that there was to accomplish, and there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, I find that somewhat... I'm somewhat skeptical about that. I mean, I find that hard. I find that hard to believe myself. I don't really buy Quinn's arguments.
Why not?
Or his story. They seem fishy. I'm not sure it's possible that anyone could have done everything there is to do.
Well, if you've been here since the beginning of time, you certainly would have had the time to do everything. But isn't it agreed upon that the universe is continually expanding?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Where does it have to expand to?
Nowhere in particular, just the universe is expanding.
Well, if the universe is expanding, there would have to be somewhere outside the universe for it to be expanding into.
No, because the universe is the universe. There's nothing outside of it.
Well,
Yeah,
if there's
it's
nothing
space
outside of
that's
it, then
expand.
therefore it can't be expanding.
All I know is that I thought that the current theories were on the universe, that the universe is continually expanding. And
Yeah,
if that's the case,
Oh.
then there's continually new places for him to go and whatever. I don't know.
I'm kind of messing with you.
I'm not a scientist. Yes, you're messing with me and whatever.
I'm kind of messing with you. I think the universe is expanding. What that usually means is that the planets and stars in the universe, the galaxies in the universe, are gradually getting further apart from one another. And that's about all it really means. I don't think it means more space is being created somehow, because I'm not sure that would even make much sense.
Here's how much I know.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I wasn't saying that to make fun of you. I was.
No,
it's a joke.
No, but it's conceivable that novelty itself would wax old like a garment. And he could have been bored of experiencing new things.
Well,
I mean, King Solomon says it. This is in the Bible. That to not be born is better than to be born. And so he may have just come to the conclusion that non-existence is better than existence, having experienced all there was to experience. Woodstock, far out, Newton, the apple, Riker. Yeah, I mean, you see, he just came to the conclusion that enough's enough already. Billions and billions of years, it's over.
Well, a being like that being able to die doesn't even make sense.
Well, surely you'd have the power to die if you had a modicum of power. I mean,
well, it's just there's so many things about the Q that just don't make sense that you have to either look at them as irresponsible children or as an analog for God. If you look at them as irresponsible children, then Quinn should have been doing something better with his life than the Q do. And if you look at them as being analog for God, then, well, heck, the same thing either way. Why doesn't he do more to make the universe a better place?
He did. He did Woodstock. He did Newton. He created Riker. I mean, he did an awful lot. He just, enough's enough already. Altruism, we can only handle so much altruism.
It gives it, well, I mean, it would give him something to do. I can't conceive of not having something to do if you have the resource, if you have unlimited resources. I can't conceive of that. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me that someone could have nothing to do and yet have unlimited resources.
Well,
they've got to lack creativity or something.
Conceive of it. I'm not impugning or complaining or defending God in any ways, but the truth is, Augustine said it best. With the Romans, who were complaining about the Roman Empire having converted to Christianity and then subsequently fallen, saying, well, a good lot of bit of good that your gods do, we converted to them, and now the empire falls. And Augustine's criticism was, you want to live in abstract luxury. You think God should promote and support your existence as one that is persisting in abstract luxury. Well, that's not particularly godly. And so suppose the Q, with their unlimited resources, eliminate all sense of poverty and struggle and so forth. They haven't necessarily created a better universe. Well, in the light of struggle and suffering being at least somewhat necessary, even if you have unlimited resources, you wouldn't necessarily want to eliminate all that sort of thing. So they might have had to content themselves with the necessity of suffering, with the necessity of struggle, and then just gotten on with it. And seeing that it's still there, they could have been disenfranchised and detached, just wanting to end it.
Oh, it seems like they could at least get rid of the Borg.
But therein they get rid of the struggle.
I think there's a considerable difference between struggle and having to deal with the Borg.
Not me. Because they are a struggle.
Well,
and I'm not saying that we shouldn't work to get rid of suffering. I think we ought to. I'm just saying that if you have a God's eye perspective of the universe, there might be certain things that you allow that don't make sense from a Brandon Kirby, dare say, a Canadian's eye perspective of the universe. It's just, it's a different playing field.
Well, okay. but if we have an obligation to do good with the level of power that we have,
Right.
it would seem to follow that we'd have an obligation to do good more if we had more power and resources. But you seem to be saying that at some point there's some peak level of power where we could do the most good. And if we had more power than that, then the amount of good we ought to do or could do would go down.
Let me ask this question.
By all
Why
means.
do people do good?
Well, it seems like,
Why not?
well, hold on.
Usually, isn't it to...
I mean, why should they or why ought they? I mean, that's two different questions.
No,
I mean,
why
why
do
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 they?
they?
Oh, why do they? Well,
Those that
I
do,
think-
obviously. I mean,
Well, I think, I guess people who do good things are probably motivated. Well,
what's the
people who-
motivation?
yeah. Well, there's a lot of different motivations.
Okay.
I'm afraid of going to hell.
Okay, exactly. There's one good motivation right there. Your beliefs in the afterlife tell you that you should do good because otherwise your afterlife will not be pleasant.
I think that's a lousy reason.
But it's a reason.
okay.
Feel free to criticize. By all means, criticize. I'm just saying that's the reason.
I'm drawing to a point here. What's going to happen
Right.
is there's plenty of reasons why. Usually it involves things like, yes, your belief in the afterlife, perhaps to have other people like you more, maybe,
Sure.
so that you'll be invited to more parties or whatever. Well, looking at it from the Q's perspective, they don't die. So they have no concern for their soul in the so-called afterlife from their perspective. They don't really care. There's enough people in the world that, in the universe, excuse me, that they can make friends with someone, and then if their attitude and doing bad things causes them to alienate those friends, well, they'll just find more others elsewhere. So in a way, I can kind of see that being a Q almost by the Q's nature themselves would make them become very selfish, and what Q does, traipsing about the galaxy, acting uppity, and snapping his fingers all the time.
Having lost sense of the other, lost empathy,
Yeah, exactly.
focused
Yes,
on
empathy.
themselves.
You can be
solely
selfish because
interested-
you don't care about consequences. There are no consequences as far as you're concerned.
Exactly. Well, Chris, I think you've hit on a very important psychological point. The truth is, it's the question that I asked the last time we did a Q episode. And it was, why would anyone suppose Picard's moralizing was superior to Q's power? And it's because there's some element of the soul that Picard had which was superior to something Q was lacking. If there's no consequences, by all means, snap your fingers as if you're Q ball, Q John Delancey's son there, and make 709's clothes disappear. But there has to be something in your soul that prevents that. In which it's not just a heaven or hell thing. It's a spiritual health thing.
And I would argue that Q don't have that.
They don't, and that's why Picard said, I would put humanity in our evolved sensibilities. I don't remember the terminology that he used. I would put that up against Q's power any day, because you have to value the eternal well-being, the soul, above the temporal well-being. Q had lots of temporal power. He could make 709's clothes disappear, but he couldn't prevent his own soul from doing that. And in that sense, I would say Picard was superior to Q. Q was temporally superior, Picard was eternally superior.
And that would make the human, like Picard, superior to Quinn as well.
Exactly.
Now, if you had the entire universe as your playground, you could do whatever you wanted, you don't care about consequences, and you could do it for as long as you wanted, wouldn't you eventually one day, whether it's years from now or centuries or millennia or whatever, wouldn't you eventually get tired of it? Just kind of say, well, there's nothing new for me to enjoy anymore.
Yeah, likely.
I certainly would. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I'm tired of it as it is.
If every day you had parties up the wazoo, could do whatever you wanted, eventually you'd run the whole gamut, I would think.
That sort of life would get you to be bored, but I think that's a lousy kind of life.
It's as if this life is not meant to be eternal. It's as if it's meant to only be temporal.
Exactly. That's kind of an interesting point there.
Yeah, I really don't think, as much as I love camping trips, I really do love St. Andrews by the Bay of Fundy, highest tides in the world. It's so gorgeous there. I love it.
But if you did it every day,
long weekend, I'm ready to come home.
Yeah.
Do something different.
You're going to get, if you keep eating chips over and over and over, you're going to get sick of them eventually. Wow. As much as you love them.
Yeah.
It's that, what was it, Socrates, Plato, someone said it was no extremes, basically. The middle of the road is the best path. I can't remember who it was.
Aristotle.
Okay.
The bottle.
I totally agree with that. And I'm sure there's some sort of philosophical terminology for this. The idea that you can't have good without bad. You can't have evil without good, that kind of thing. There has to be a balance.
I don't agree with that. In Picard's criticism of Q in The Tapestry is my criticism therein. C.S. Lewis said it best. Badness is just spoiled goodness. Picard said, you are not God! Because Q is so chaotic. He said, the universe is not so badly designed. Well, that implies some sort of a concept of a good design. Badness, when you conceive of it as spoiled goodness, it wasn't necessarily the positive traits that Hitler had. He had power, he had charisma, he had leadership, he had a whole slew of things going for him. But he lacked mercy. It's not what he had, it's what he did not have. And if you conceive of evil as a lack of a thing, it ceases to have power, which is to say, evil only works insofar as it is dependent on good things. Evil is dependent on goodness. Good doesn't depend on evil. I don't think, if you want to conceive of goodness, you have to have some sort of a conception of evil. Yeah, epistemologically, I agree with you, Chris. But metaphysically, I think you can have good without evil. I think you can have a concept of a good design without the concept of a bad design. You can have a concept of a proper movie script without the concept of an improper movie script.
Could you have the concept of chaos without law?
No, you couldn't, but you can have a concept of law without chaos.
Okay, well, that's exactly what the Q are. The Q are basically chaos.
I agree. I totally agree with you. I'm just saying that when Picard says the universe is not so badly designed, he's seeing Q as this chaos, but chaos is totally dependent on order. Evil is totally dependent on goodness. I don't think that they're equivalents.
Hey, folks. I think you might not actually be disagreeing. I think you might be using different terms for some things here. Because I think what Chris is saying is that we wouldn't call something good and have that mean anything unless we were able to contrast it with something that's not good.
Bingo.
And Lewis makes that point as well. I mean, that C.S. Lewis says that in The Problem of Pain, among other places. And that doesn't mean that good is dependent on evil, but you have to have a meaningful possibility for evil in order to have a meaningful actuality of good.
You have to have something to compare it against.
Because otherwise, there's it doesn't mean anything to say that this is good. If everything's good, if everyth's good, then nothing really is.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing really is.
You can't say, "Well, I had a good day today." Well,
unless it was possible that you could have had a bad day.
Just had a day today. Yeah. You can't have a prophet without a pirate.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but it might be that you can't have a Kaiopaka without the possibility of someone like Ducat existing in your universe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if your entire life is living in chaos where you're just partying all the time, doing whatever you want, you're going to get burned out on it. You're going to get tired of it because you're not experiencing the other side of things.
Oh, you lack contrast in your life? Well,
yeah.
I think that might be a problem with the way Quinn is living his life.
Well, could very well be.
I've argued before on this show, if you may recall, that I think someone who is physically healthy is not trying to avoid physical torture or some extenuating circumstance like that. Who says they want to commit suicide or attempts to commit suicide is not making a rational decision in that moment. That's my position, and if that's going to be my position, I have to defend it in the case of Quinn as well. So I guess that might be where I'm coming from. But there's so many things about the Q that just don't make any sense. That there's so many counterfactuals involved in the whole idea of who the Q are that this might not even be a substantive issue to argue about in Quinn's case. I'm just suspicious of the overtones of supporting euthanasia for humans in real life.
Why?
That the episode might have.
What's wrong with euthanasia?
Oh dear.
I believe that it is throwing away one of your greatest gifts that is really, suicide is terrible. Death is a terrible thing.
Well,
and it's not something to be
not always
to be embraced unless you are going somewhere better and you have a reason.
Right. This euthanasia debate has been raging on for centuries. It's not going away anytime soon, and we're certainly not going to solve it tonight.
Yeah, let's go on to the next thing. We're about there in our time. We've done 20 minutes or so on Quinn.
He's actually watching the clock.
Yeah, we've done about 20 minutes on Quinn. Let's spend the rest of the show talking about Daddy Q and Little Q, which is
Go ahead.
That's what I'd like to get to. I think splitting this episode in half, spending half the time on each thing is probably a good idea. We could argue back and forth about Quinn all night, though. I don't think we'd get very much further, though. Anyway, about Little Q. This is one of my favorite arcs in Star Trek, is Q coming to the Voyager crew, Captain Janeway, for advice on parenting. I just thought that was so hilarious. First, he wants to make out with her to have a hybrid human Q child, which is just ridiculous because if he wanted human DNA, he could just snap his fingers and clone it, you know?
Gosh, it's been so long since I've seen this show. I need to do that again soon. I've forgotten all about this stuff.
Oh, well, the first time Q appears on Voyager after the Quinn incident, he is trying to hit on Captain Janeway. And he gets really obnoxious and creepy about it too. And
yeah, he was a bit.
He does all this cliched stuff that it's just really funny to try and get on Captain Janeway's good side and try to get her to mate with him.
You know who would be the perfect mate for Q? Loxana Troy.
You know, when I read Ender in Exile, there's this character Dorabella in Ender in Exile who is Italian, and other than being Italian and having an Italian accent, I always think of her as being played by the lady who played Roxana Troy because I don't know, she's so much like Roxana Troy, it seems to me. So if anybody ever gets around to reading that, you might know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so eventually, like many of the stories in the past, I don't know, when did they get to the point of, instead of Q being a prankster and eventually getting outwitted, they got to the point where Q is being taught responsibility by what goes on?
Oh, that was in the Quinn episode. That happened right away. Yeah, absolutely. Where Q even expressed sympathies towards Quinn's position. Now, in the next episode, you have Q going to war for Quinn's beliefs and conceiving a child under those circumstances. And in the third episode, you have Q trying to raise that child.
Yeah.
The whole lot of it, where Q is saying, okay, well, now let's be responsible rather than just dithyrambic.
Yeah, he grows up, which is just so bizarre, that this character who has all power and all knowledge nevertheless has a growing up experience.
It's the myth of Gyges. It's Gollum versus Frodo. One of them has a certain maturity that the other one lacks.
You mean Q and the humans?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Q lacks a certain self-control that other human beings have.
Yeah, well, he learns it. One of the things that was interesting was how he immediately was dealing with little Q as a rebellious teenager, which and how do you deal with that? It seems to me that it's you never really, if you have a new philosophy, a new religion, a new ideology that comes along, it never really gets put to the test until you have to pass it on to the next generation. How much of it is going to survive the generation gap? Until it has done that at least once, you don't really know what it's going to be. You don't really know the real shape that it's going to take until it's passed on a generation, And I mean, I think that's true of any ideology. So it's interesting. I mean, you can sort of categorize different ways of life by how they approach this problem. Even if they don't have statements specifically on it, there are certain things, about child raising implicit in most ideologies. I'm reminded of one of the most extreme examples is the Shakers. Have you all heard of the Shakers?
No.
Mm-mm.
The Shakers were an extreme. Well, there's a reason you haven't heard of them, which is very interesting. The Shakers were an extreme puritanical sect
Right.
that went to the furthest extreme possible with those Victorian ideas, which basically they came to the point where they believed that all sexual intercourse was sin, period.
Right.
And so they had this commune where the men and the women lived completely separately.
Oh my.
And they never had any babies. And that's why there aren't any Shakers around today.
I've heard of that.
there aren't any Shakers around today. Why? Because they all died out.
Well,
It's very
actually,
true.
I was confused by your definition of Shakers at first. Yeah, I actually live near a place called Shakertown here in Kentucky.
Yeah, but they don't have actual Shakers. I mean,
They
the
may not
religion
be, descended from the original Shakers, but they probably live the same lifestyle is what it is.
Mm.
Well, I mean, I don't think the Shaker cult, the one that believed that all sex was sin and you can't have children, at least the original movement all died out. The last two of them were little old ladies. Were the last two who were left. It got in the newspaper. Last Shaker dies. So much for their believing the kingdom of God would show up in their time, because
Yeah, it's a restored Shaker community. I just looked it up.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. You'd think it would have been disproven. I mean, they all died. They're not. They all died out. So the Q had gotten to a situation like that, where their ideology did not provide at all for the idea of passing their culture, their ideas, their way of life on to the next generation. And as such, Q is in a total moral vacuum. He's got nothing. He kind of gets this general sense that that little Q shouldn't be blowing up inhabited planets just for laughs.
Right.
But why shouldn't he do that? I don't think Q would be capable of explaining this. So that's why he tries to get So that's why he tries to get the Voyager crew to sort of babysit little Q. He said, I hope some of your vaunted Federation ideals will rub off on him. Because he's in a total moral vacuum. And I mean, like the Shakers, his way of life has no provision for a next generation. And of course, there's all kinds of stuff in there about hypocrisy, that children have a way of just zooming in on hypocrisy in their parents.
I've heard that.
I mean, they just smell it